Coming up on Arirang News. The doctors' strike in South Korea continues into its second day, with more than 70% of the country's trainee doctors having submitted their resignations, the majority of them having left their places of work. The government says it'll hold them legally responsible. For the first time in 20 years, the government will lift green belt zones, or land protected from development, in the regions outside the capital area to boost the regional economy. This in President Yoon's remarks as he visited the industrial city of Ulsan. From this year onward, July 14th will be a day to honor defectors from North Korea. The Yoon administration designated one as part of efforts to embrace them as a step toward reunification. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. Patients are at risk in South Korea with the nationwide doctors' strike continuing for a second day today. Almost 9,000 trainee doctors, which is over 70% of the country's interns and residents, have submitted their resignations so far, and majority of them have left their places of work. Our Yoon begins our coverage tonight.
The nationwide doctors' strike continued for a second day on Wednesday as they protested against the expansion of medical schools quota by 2,000 to over 5,000 starting in 2025. Over 8,800 trainee doctors, or more than 70% of the country's interns and residents, had submitted letters of resignation as of 10 p.m. Tuesday, though none of them have been accepted. Out of these, 7,800 have not shown up for work. The total number of leave of absence letters from medical students announced on Wednesday was over 8,700 nationwide, or over 40% of the total. As about two-thirds of trainee doctors have walked out, medical services have been disrupted and patients are facing inconvenience. For example, at Samsung Medical Center, one of Seoul's 5 major teaching hospitals, 30% of operations scheduled for Wednesday were postponed. Surgical procedures at the Severance Hospital were less than half of the usual amount. The focus of large hospitals has shifted to prioritize critical and emergency care, causing outpatient appointments to be postponed, while some patients recovering from surgery were discharged earlier than scheduled.
My father had emergency surgery for colon cancer, so today I came to check on the results, but I received a text message asking for my understanding, saying that appointments might be delayed due to the high number of patients.
In a briefing on Wednesday, the government stated that protecting people's lives was a priority and urged doctors to immediately return to work and to discuss the medical student quota issue with them. To minimize disruptions to medical services, the government plans to extend the opening hours of public health centers and loosen restrictions on access to 12 military hospital emergency rooms. It has also issued return-to-work orders to a majority of the doctors who have walked out. To this, junior doctors are demanding the government backtracks on the plan to increase the number of medical students, while the Korean Medical Association calls its return-to-work orders amount to suppression. Yoon, Arirang News.
As doctors leave their places of work en masse, the government announced today that strict response measures will be taken against what they call an illegal collective action, which could involve arrest. Our Lee Si-hoo has more.
The South Korean government says that it will take strict measures against what it calls illegal collective action from doctors protesting the medical school enrollment quota increase by leaving their posts. This is according to the Justice and Interior Ministries, as well as the Supreme Prosecutor's Office and the National Police Agency at their joint briefing held to discuss the issue on Wednesday. Saying that collective action that, quote, takes people's lives hostage cannot be justified, they said they will conduct investigations on individuals and organizations participating to hold them legally responsible. All this to prevent public health risks.
The government has issued an order to doctors who have resigned or left the medical field to commence work. If the collective refusal of medical treatment continues, an investigation will be conducted strictly in accordance with relevant regulations such as the Medical Service Act.
Minister Lee said when necessary, arrest warrants will be issued for a prompt investigation. Justice Minister Park Sung-jae also said official indictments will be brought against resident doctors refusing to return to their posts. But if the doctors do return to duty soon, the investigation will be closed. Meanwhile, the Justice Ministry said it will offer legal support for people affected by the protests.
We'll prioritize the protection of victims by providing sufficient legal support to patients and their families affected by illegal collective action taken by doctors.
The ministry vowed to offer pro bono legal consultations and litigation aid utilizing existing legal infrastructure. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
In other news, for the first time in 20 years, the government will lift the greenbelt zones or land protected from development in the regions outside the capital area to boost the regional economy. This in President Yoon Suk-yeol's remarks as he visited the industrial city of Ulsan to continue his discussion of policies with citizens. Our Kim Do-yeon with the latest.
In Ulsan, the first city that was designated for industrial development, President Yoon Suk-yeol shared his plans to utilize more land for new industries to grow. This came on Wednesday as he hosted a livelihood discussion there, a city that led the nation's growth in shipbuilding, automobile, and petrochemical industries.
기존의 패스트 팔로워에서 이제 퍼스트 무버로 탈바꿈을 새롭게 해야 합니다. 정부는 첨단 산업과 미래 산업을 새로운 성장 엔진으로 삼아 울산과 대한민국이 다시 도약할 기회를 만들 것입니다. 이를 위해 제일 중요한 것이 바로 새로운 산업을 전개할 수 있는 입지 공간을 마련하는 것입니다.
He spoke about lifting greenbelt and agricultural land restrictions to efficiently combine labor, capital, and technology to maximize economic values. Specifically, he said he believes in local government autonomy in terms of lifting restrictions in order to foster competitive industries. To achieve this, he's looking into adjusting the rules when it comes to lifting restrictions, which are the same throughout the country, to be different depending on each region and type of area, as he called such rule a, quote, obstacle. These rules haven't been changed in 20 years. He also added that smart and vertical farming are new industries with a lot of potential, so he will adjust regulations of the agricultural land restrictions for the industry's use of more land. All these reforms and the restrictions of land use, he says, are important to achieving his goal of regional balanced growth.
12개 부처와 지자체의 농지 이용 규제의 종류가 무려 336가지에 달하고 있습니다. 전수조사해서 시대의 변화를 따라가지 못하는 낡은 규제는 신속히 개혁하겠습니다.
At the Wednesday's discussion were 60 citizens, including leaders of big companies in Ulsan and a student from the city's vocational education Meister High School, to share their views on each of the topics. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Seoul is working to clinch a deal with Washington to help South Korean defense firms enter the global market. The presidential office said Wednesday that Second Deputy National Security Director In Sung-hwan held a fourth meeting to evaluate and discuss how to ramp up defense exports as a national strategy. Speaking with relevant state institute and firms, including Hanwha Aerospace, LIG Next One, and Hyundai Rotem, In highlighted the sector as a future cash cow for the nation. Seoul says it'll work with the U.S. to conclude the reciprocal defense procurement agreement within the year. Aiming to become one of the world's top 4 defense export powers, Korea will focus on developing advanced strategic fields such as space and artificial intelligence. The Yoon administration has announced that this upcoming July 14th will be a day to honor defectors from North Korea. It's to raise awareness of the importance of embracing them as a step toward reunification. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jung-sil reports.
A much-awaited day for North Korean defectors has been unveiled here in the South. On Wednesday, Seoul's Unification Ministry announced that July 14th will be a day dedicated to honor them.
North Korean Defectors Day will be very symbolic for the 34,000 North Korean defectors who have faced unspeakable adversity in the process of defecting and are now living soundly.
The ministry plans to hold the first ceremony in July as soon as the relevant laws are in place. This is the first time that a celebratory day has been dedicated to defectors from the north, although the South Korean government has offered various support programs since legislation on North Korean defectors was adopted back in 1997. The government support extends from helping them find a home, a job, giving initial settlement money, and offering special college admission, among others.
But there have been continuous calls requesting the dedication of a day to honor North Korean defectors as they sometimes face discrimination in South Korea as someone coming from the north. The South Korean Unification Ministry hopes the day will give more courage and hope to the defectors in their future endeavors here.
With Pyongyang's recent comments on South and North Korea being, quote, two separate countries, abandoning the idea of reunification, it is the South Korean government's stance to welcome defectors from the north and continue with the aim of reunification that guarantees peace and freedom. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the U.S. has reaffirmed cautious support for North Korea's outreach to Japan. The Pentagon's deputy spokesperson Sabrina Singh said on Tuesday that Washington would welcome its close ally Japan's talks with North Korea if it were to strengthen regional stability. Separately, U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller also noted Pyongyang's offer to engage with Tokyo, but reiterated Washington's goal of achieving the full denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. Last week, the North Korean leader's sister Kim Yo-jong suggested that Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida might be able to visit the North on the condition that Tokyo does not take issues with the regime's right to self-defense and leaves the past abduction of Japanese citizens off the table. Turning to the Israel-Hamas war. The U.S. has vetoed a UNSC draft resolution led by Algeria, calling for an immediate halt in the fighting. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has reaffirmed his stance to continue the war in Gaza. Chung Eun-ju has the latest.
The U.S. on Tuesday vetoed an Algerian-led United Nations Security Council draft resolution, which called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. Washington argues that the draft resolution would jeopardize ongoing talks to end the war in the region. 13 countries on the 15-member body UN Security Council voted in favor of Algeria's resolution, while the UK abstained. As a permanent member, however, the U.S. has veto power. The U.S. veto comes as it drafted its own resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. The difference between both plans is the timing. While the Algerian-led draft called for an immediate ceasefire, the U.S. draft calls for a ceasefire as soon as is practicable. It also said that such a ceasefire should take place on the condition that all hostages are released, while urging the lifting of barriers preventing aid from reaching Gaza. It's still uncertain when the UNSC will vote on the U.S.-led proposal. The U.S., close allies with Israel, had avoided using the word ceasefire. But President Joe Biden's recent use of it and the latest U.S. resolution signals a shift, as the two have recently clashed over Israel's operations in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Tuesday that Israel will not pay any price for the return of hostages still held in Gaza. In a recorded speech uploaded to X, formerly known as Twitter, Netanyahu said Israel is committed to continuing the war until all objectives are achieved, which include eradicating Hamas, releasing all hostages, and ensuring that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel. The remarks came as the U.S. plans to send its Middle East envoy to the region for continued talks between the U.S., Egypt, Israel, and Qatar that seek to broker a ceasefire and the release of hostages. Chung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Following an earlier plea for justice from his wife, this time Alexei Navalny's mother is urging Russia's Vladimir Putin to return the remains of her son. Moon Hye-ryun reports.
I appeal to you, Vladimir Putin. The resolution of the issue depends solely on you. Let me, finally, see my son.
The mother of Alexei Navalny, a long-standing critic of Vladimir Putin who died in a remote prison last week, pleaded for the Russian president to return her son's body in a YouTube video. Authorities at the Siberian penal colony where he was serving a 3-decade-long sentence announced his death on Friday local time, claiming that the cause was sudden death syndrome. His family has been unable to recover his body so far, being told that he would be released only after a post-mortem examination had been conducted. Navalny's team believes that the campaigner was murdered on the orders of Putin and that his body is being withheld so they can cover traces, especially since he appeared to be in good health in a court video a day before his death. Western governments have also blamed the Kremlin, with the United States pressing for complete transparency on the details of his death. US President Joe Biden also announced a new wave of sanctions against Russia to be implemented on Friday in light of this development and the ongoing war in Ukraine. While details of the new sanctions have not yet been released, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said they will target Moscow's defense and industrial bases, as well as sources of economic revenue. This comes in addition to the pre-existing range of sanctions that the US has imposed on Russia for both the war in Ukraine and the 2020 poisoning and imprisonment of Navalny. Despite the Russian government's firm stance rejecting biased and unrealistic assumptions over Navalny's death, more than 400 people have been arrested as people gathered at vigils and protests across the country. Demonstrations are also taking place near Russian embassies across the world. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Heavy snow warnings have been issued as of 8 p.m. Wednesday in South Korea across the capital region, Gangwon-do, Gyeongsang-buk-do, and Chungcheong-buk-do provinces. Up to 10 centimeters of snow is expected until Thursday morning. To help with the morning commute on Thursday, the Seoul Metro is extending its rush hour time by 30 minutes, meaning there'll be more subway trains on lines 1 to 8 and more city buses running between 7 a.m. and 9:30 a.m. Rush hour timetable usually ends at 9 a.m. Earlier on Wednesday, the Seoul city government raised its snow removal measurement to level 2, deploying over 8,000 workers and over 1,000 snow removal vehicles. A record number of Korea's men were at home last year, taking care of their children. According to Statistics Korea on Wednesday, nearly 16,000 men were responsible for full-time child rearing in 2023. This is reportedly 3 times the figure from 2013 and the highest recorded since data was first compiled in 1999. Pundits are linking this trend to corporate support of paternity leaves amid growing participation of men in parenting. However, the figure itself is still 50 times lower than the number of women who stay at home to take care of their young. Staying with recent data shared by Statistics Korea, the number of one-person businesses here in South Korea is on the rise, reaching a 15-year high last year. Our Park Gun-woo went out to find out what's behind the rise and what is needed to help those businesses survive.
A spacious cafe located in Seoul. This lady has been running this cafe for 5 years, all by herself, without hiring any workers. But she's not the only person running a one-person business in Korea. According to Statistics Korea, the number of one-person businesses reached its highest level in 15 years to over 4.3 million in 2023. That figure is the highest since 2008 financial crisis. So what's behind the increase? I asked the cafe owner why she has decided to work alone.
Because of labor costs. I wasn't able to hire people due to low sales when I first started this cafe at the early stage of COVID-19. So I've been running the shop by myself since then.
Rising ingredient prices were another factor that made her operate the shop by herself. She also said that increasing the price of items on her menu was not an easy option, especially when thinking about her regular customers. While other one-person shops have similar concerns, some are coming up with ways to alleviate worries with digital kiosks helping to reduce costs. Nowadays, kiosks like this are replacing workers, which allows these one-person businesses to reduce their labor costs. A kiosk like this costs around 1 million won, or $750, which is more cost-effective than hiring a few people. But as a consequence, college students are having a harder time finding part-time jobs.
There are not many kinds of part-time jobs available. It's difficult because there are only short-term part-time jobs, usually instead of longer-term ones.
Meanwhile, the government announced ways to support small businesses, including through financial support to help pay electricity bills, during recent related policy meetings with citizens earlier this month. However, an expert said more support is needed.
The government should maximize the amount of financial support, including policy funds, to help small and medium-sized businesses in times of difficulties.
While hinting at 4 more months of difficulties before interest rates possibly fall in June, he added all businesses, including small and medium-sized firms, surviving that harsh period is crucial for the Korean economy to grow when the economy returns to normal. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
The South Korean crime thriller series, A Killer Paradox, has topped the most viewed non-English content on Netflix. The series, which stars Choi Woo-sik and Son Seok-gu, recorded 5.5 million views last week. It ranked number 1 in 10 countries, including South Korea, Thailand, Vietnam, and Singapore, while also making it into the top 10 in 43 countries. The crime thriller with dark comedic moments is based on a South Korean webtoon and centers around a detective's pursuit of a killer. In Sydney, Australia, a taekwondo instructor has been arrested on suspicion of murdering a family of 3 from South Korea. Police in Australia said Wednesday the 49-year-old suspect, also born in South Korea, allegedly killed a 7-year-old student who goes to his academy and the boy's parents in Western Sydney. The crime was discovered when the suspect went to a local hospital with the wounds to his chest, stomach, and arms. He had reportedly told officers there that he'd been attacked in a supermarket parking. But then police found 3 bodies, 2 of which the 7-year-old boy and his mother were discovered at the taekwondo facility. For some guilty of murder in New South Wales state, the maximum sentence could be life imprisonment.
Snow and rain will continue in inland areas until tomorrow morning. As the temperatures drop overnight, roads will be slippery on the way to work tomorrow morning. In addition, with winds blowing strongly, the coastlines of Gyeongsang-Namdo province are under a strong wind advisory. Please take extra precautions. With a heavy snow warning issued in the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do, northern Gyeonggi-do, and northeastern Gyeongsang-Buk-do provinces, a lot of snow has been falling. In the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province, where around 40 centimeters of snow have already accumulated, more than 50 centimeters will fall by tomorrow. There will also be heavy snow of up to 30 centimeters or more on the east coast. Tomorrow's Seoul will start off at 0, Gwangju and Busan 5 degrees Celsius. Daytime temperatures will move up to 5 in Seoul, Daejeon and Gyeongju, Busan 8 degrees. Snow will continue until the day after tomorrow on the east coast. After the snowstorm stops, the morning temperatures will drop to below 0 temperatures. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Well, that is all for this newscast. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 10 p.m. with the AI headline news. Good night.